Namaste, I am Dr. S.Padmapriya speaking to you. Today, I will be covering lesson number 10, which is Asymmetric Information, which is part of Unit 1 of Microeconomics of UGC Net Economics syllabus. I have already covered many other topics related to economics in my earlier videos. Those include Introduction to Economics and other topics of microeconomics. These videos will help the beginner student learning the various topics related to economics. Now let us come to the topic asymmetric information. Symmetric information is when both parties have equal knowledge. Asymmetric information assumes that in every business transaction, buyers and sellers don't have the same information. James A. Mirrlees of Britain and William Vickrey of USA won the 1996 Nobel Prize in Economics for their fundamental contribution to the economic theory of incentives in an area of microeconomics dealing with situations where decision makers have different information. Their work focused on situations in which one party has the advantage of more information than the other. Example, the seller of home properties knows more about home properties than the buyer of home properties. Their work in asymmetric information has helped in the design of more efficient auctions and tax systems. Earlier, it was assumed that individuals or firms or governments had the same information. The differences in behavior were noted down as preferences. The essential part of William Vickrey's research was concerned with the nature of different kinds of auction and how they can be best designed to generate economic efficiency. Mirrlees said that a progressive tax is not necessarily the best. Mirrlees provided the first mathematical rigorous treatment of efficiency and equity that is central to modern economic policy debate. Now, what is adverse selection? Adverse selection is a situation in which sellers have information that buyers do not have, and vice versa, about some aspect of product quality. Thus, it is a case where asymmetric information is exploited by either of the two parties. Asymmetric information is also called as information failure. It happens when one party to a transaction has greater material knowledge than the other party. Generally, the seller is the one with more knowledge. Example, let us take the case of life insurance. In the specific case of life insurance, adverse selection is a very great possibility. In this specific case, adverse selection is the tendency of those in high-risk jobs to purchase life insurance products. In this special case, we observe that the buyer has more information about his or her health. Therefore, in order to fight adverse selection, insurance companies reduce exposure to large claims by either limiting coverage or raising premiums. There is yet another example of adverse selection in the marketplace. A seller may have better information than a buyer about products and services being offered, putting the buyer at a disadvantage in the transaction. Let us take the example of a company's managers who may be more willing to issue shares when they know that the share price is overvalued compared to the real value. Buyers can end up buying overvalued shares and lose money. Similarly, in the second-hand car market, a seller may know about a vehicle's defect and charge the buyer more without disclosing the issue. So, in these two cases, which we have just observed, the seller has more knowledge than the buyer. Two cases are the case when a share price is overvalued, and in the case of a car market where the seller has more knowledge about the product than the buyer. Whereas in the previous case that we have observed, which is the case of life insurance policy, it is often the buyer who hides the information. So, in the case of a second-hand car market, it is a seller who hides the information. In the case of the overvaluation of a share price, it is the seller who has more information, whereas in the case of a life insurance policy, it is the buyer who has more information sometimes. Consequences of adverse selection. The asymmetry of information often leads to making bad decisions, including doing more business with less profitable or riskier people or groups or market segments. Therefore, adverse selection is when sellers have information that buyers do not have, or vice versa, about some aspect of product quality. Lemon's problem. They refer to the issues that arise regarding the value of an investment or product due to asymmetric information possessed by the buyer and the seller. The lemon problem was put forward in a research paper, The Market for Lemons, Quality, Uncertainty, and the Market Mechanism, written in the 1960s by George A. Akerlof, an economist and professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Defective used cars came to be known as lemons. The lemons problems exist in the marketplace between buyers and sellers, as well as in the arena of investing, related to the disparity in the perceived value of an investment between buyers and sellers. The lemons problem is also prevalent in financial sector areas, including insurance and credit markets. Now we are going to study about moral hazard. Like adverse selection, moral hazard occurs when there is asymmetric information between the two parties, but where a change in the behavior of one party is exposed after a deal is struck. Whereas in the case of adverse selection, there is lack of symmetric information prior to a deal between a buyer and a seller. Moral hazard is the risk that one party has not entered into the contract in good faith or has provided false details about its assets, liabilities, or credit capacity. For instance, in the investment banking sector, it may well be known that government regulatory bodies will bail out failing banks. As a result, bank employees may take on excessive amounts of risk to score lucrative bonuses, knowing that if their risky bets do not pan out, the bank will be saved somehow. Thus, moral hazard is a situation in which one party gets involved in a risky event knowing that it is protected against the risk that the other party will incur the cost. Example 1. In a financial market, there is a risk that the borrower might engage in activities that are undesirable from the lender's point of view because they make him less likely to pay back a loan. It occurs when the borrower knows that someone else will pay for the mistake he makes. This in turn gives him the incentive to act in a riskier way. This economic concept is known as moral hazard. Another example is if you have not insured your house against future damages, it implies that a loss will be completely borne by you at the time of accident like a fire or burglary. But if your house is insured for its full value, then if anything happens, you have less incentive to protect it against any accident. In this case, the insurance firm bears the losses and problem of moral hazard arises. So, in this important chapter, we have covered the various topics such as adverse selection and moral hazard, which are very important aspects of asymmetric information. As I have already stated, there are many other videos relating to economics which has been made available. So, thank you all for the opportunity. Namaste.